Leonardo DiCaprio was not born into glamour or the polished ease that people often associate with Hollywood legends, but instead into a modest and sometimes unstable environment in Los Angeles, where his mother worked tirelessly to provide for him after his parents separated. And from those early days, walking through neighborhoods where crime and struggle were part of daily life, he developed a quiet resilience that would later define both his career and his personal philosophy. Because before the fame, before the luxury, before the flashing cameras and screaming fans, there was simply a determined boy attending auditions, facing rejection after rejection, trying to convince casting directors that he belonged on screen, and when he finally began landing small roles in commercials and television, it was less a moment of overnight success and more the beginning of a long, grinding climb toward recognition. A climb that would eventually lead him to emotionally powerful performances in films that proved he was more than just another young actor. And as his talent became undeniable, Hollywood started paying attention. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the cultural explosion that followed when he starred in Titanic under the direction of James Cameron. A film that did not just succeed but dominated the world, turning him into a global icon almost overnight, where suddenly his face was everywhere, his name was on every magazine, and his life was no longer his own. As fans chased him through streets, media outlets dissected his every move, and the pressure of being labeled the ultimate romantic star began to feel like a cage rather than a reward. Because while the world saw wealth, charm, and success, DiCaprio himself was quietly struggling with the loss of privacy and the overwhelming nature of fame, forcing him to make a decision that would define the next phase of his life: to step away from the easy path of repeating the same type of roles and instead pursue characters that challenged him, characters that were darker, more complex, and often deeply flawed. And it was during this transformative period that his collaboration with Martin Scorsese became one of the most important creative partnerships in modern cinema, producing films that allowed him to reshape his image and prove his depth as an actor, while at the same time his financial success grew exponentially, with each project earning him millions and elevating him into the ranks of Hollywood's highest-paid stars, enabling a lifestyle that included luxury homes in prime locations, access to exclusive events, private travel, and a collection of high-end vehicles that symbolized the rewards of his hard work. Yet even within this world of privilege, he maintained a careful balance, avoiding excessive public exposure and surrounding himself with a trusted circle of long-time friends, choosing loyalty and familiarity over constant expansion of his social life. And while his romantic relationships consistently attracted global attention, often involving high-profile models and public figures, he resisted the traditional path of marriage, keeping his personal life guarded and refusing to let public expectations dictate his private decisions, which only added to the intrigue surrounding him, as fans and media alike speculated endlessly about his choices, creating a mix of admiration and criticism that followed him throughout his career. But beyond the headlines and the glamorous image, there was also a narrative of persistence that unfolded quietly over the years, especially in the context of awards recognition, where despite delivering performances that were widely praised in films like The Aviator *, Blood Diamond *, and The Wolf of Wall Street *, he repeatedly fell short of winning an Academy Award, a pattern that turned into a global talking point and even a source of humor online. Yet instead of allowing frustration to derail him, he continued to push himself further, taking on physically and emotionally demanding roles, culminating in his performance in *The Revenant*, a film that required extreme endurance and commitment. And when he finally stood on the Oscar stage to accept the award for Best Actor, it was not just a professional achievement, but the culmination of decades of effort, disappointment, and resilience. A moment that resonated with audiences around the world because it represented the idea that persistence eventually pays off. And rather than using that moment solely to celebrate himself, he shifted the focus toward a cause that had become increasingly central to his life. Speaking about climate change and environmental responsibility, highlighting his work with the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation,